Thank you, Maya and Stephanie and IQC and the University of Oklahoma for having me here. I have enjoyed meandering around Oklahoma on a couple of road trips over the last few years. I have family in Texoma, and I stayed at the Frank Lloyd Wright building, the Price Tower in Bartlesville, and had a good time there. So it's good to be back, and it's great to be with a group of people who are also passionate about Oklahoma's communities, cities, towns, and places in between. And before I get started, I just want to show you a glimpse of some of the projects I've made, ways I've tried to reach out to people in public space, to share more of our ideas, to share more of our memories, to share more of our anxieties, and to share more of our aspirations. And all of it is about reimagining the ways that our communities can be built and designed, and how our places can better reflect what matters to us as a community and as individuals. Most of you have been dedicating your time and your energy to improving your places, so I thought I could help best by sharing some projects that may be of interest to you and your work, and share more about the creative process. So I'll get in depth about a street art experiment that turned into a startup, a nationwide startup, to help organizations and residents collaborate on the places they care about. And I'll tell you about the story of the Before I Die project, and the value of contemplative public spaces to address our growing needs to improve our mental health and to build trust and understanding at the local level. So one of my favorite books is by Antoine Saint-Exupéry, and he said, "A rock pile ceases to be a rock pile the moment a single man contemplates it, bearing within him the image of a cathedral." And how we see things makes all the difference. Our attitude in any set of circumstances, our openness, our vision for ourselves, and what we make of the world. And so I wanted to start by sharing a story about someone who's inspired me. It's a true story, and I think it's a great lesson on where good ideas come from. So this is a true story about a man named Joseph Paxton, who was a gardener in the 1800s, and he was the first person in England to grow the giant water lily plant. So the giant water lily is the biggest flowering plant in the world. It can grow up to 8 feet in diameter. And it has a special cross-ribbed structure that gives this lily pad a really rigid form. And this made Joseph wonder how strong it really was. So he put his child on it, and it still floated. But he didn't stop there. He somehow found other people's children and loaded them onto the lily pad too, and discovered it could support a whopping 5 kids. So when he realized just how strong the lily pad was, he wondered, what if this structure could be applied to other things? And so he used the same structure to create experimental greenhouses, and then he made this. The Crystal Palace, this gigantic cast iron and glass building in London for the Great Exhibition of 1851. And more than 15,000 people came together in this space to celebrate the latest technology during the Industrial Revolution. So Joseph translated the structure of the giant water lily plant into this gigantic building, and he was knighted for his work. So I like this story a lot because I aspire to have the openness of mind where the strength of a leaf can lead you to reimagine the way we build our buildings. And it's because he was curious and he tried things out and he kept an open mind. And I think that's the core of how good ideas develop. Following your curiosity, experimenting, and allowing your many life experiences to influence you for the rest of your life. And because of that attitude, Joseph the gardener also became Joseph the architect, which makes me think about the idea of disciplines. We can make disciplines as small or as big as we like, Disciplines are just one way to categorize fields of study and interest, and there are many spaces between traditional disciplines, and no one says you can't go outside of the lines. So it seems only natural to me that we make our own disciplines out of the bits and pieces that we're interested in. You know, that each and every one of us has a unique discipline that's made up of our life history, our personal interests, and this continues to change as we grow and change. So I studied architecture and graphic design at the University of Michigan. And then later I got a master's degree in urban planning at Columbia University. And over time, bits and pieces of these disciplines and then my own questions and experiences kind of mixed around to inform the things I do today. I want to go way back for a moment. This is my dad and my mom. They are from Taiwan, and they immigrated to the U.S. And my dad became a doctor in Chicago. And then they moved to Pittsburgh, where I was born, and where Tom Murphy was former mayor, or became mayor after that, as you know. And then we moved to the cornfields of Ohio, where I grew up in a small city called Lima. And we lived in a house with like 7 different kinds of green wallpaper. And my dad wore this mustard cardigan every Thanksgiving. And I remember after dinner every night, I loved to draw. I had so many notebooks. And when we had reports due in elementary school, I loved creating these elaborate book report covers. Here are some shots of them. And I eventually channeled this creative energy by studying graphic design. And when I grew up, I moved to New York City, and I started out working at the New York Times as a designer. And during this time, I happened to catch an episode of New York, a documentary film by Rick Burns. And if you're interested in the history of cities, I highly recommend it. I learned about master planner Robert Moses, who planned to bulldoze a big strip of lower Manhattan to make way for a 10-lane highway. And then I learned about journalist turned activist Jane Jacobs, who got her community so worked up that in 1962, they prevented this 10-lane highway from being built. And it still blows my mind to think about how different New York would be today if that highway had happened, because the slums that Moses was trying to clear out are now some of the greatest neighborhoods. It's Soho, the West Village, the East Village, Chinatown, Little Italy, the Lower East Side. All of those neighborhoods would have been crushed. And it made me think about, all the cities that we have today and all the cities that could have been, depending on who gets involved. And that's when I decided to study urban planning. And during that time, I realized that there was a lot of information important to communities that never really made it down to the ground. So I devoted my skills, my design skills, to design for things that I believed in. One of my inspirations during this time was Charles and Ray Eames, who made chairs and houses and films, and this exhibit called Mathematica in 1961. Where they made the typically dry topic of math into something really fun and engaging. And in a related way, I wanted to make civic information more fun and engaging. So I worked with community groups and nonprofits to design things for them, to improve citizens' access to their rights and resources. I designed a guide for street vendors that illustrates their rights and the most commonly violated rules. I made renters' rights more accessible through a deck of tenants' rights flashcards. I designed campaigns about access to safe water, censorship, and food security. I worked with recovering drug addicts in Vancouver to improve access to resources. And I worked with a community group in Johannesburg to improve local information sharing tools by installing chalkboards in public space. And through these experiences, I learned the value of doing what you can with what you have. I learned the value of being scrappy. And I also started to see the universal limitations that residents have in sharing information with one another. We have more and more tools to reach out across the world, but it's still hard to reach out to everyone in your entire neighborhood. And over the course of history, our communities have changed. They transformed from these densely knit, village-like local groups into these sparsely knit, spatially dispersed social networks. And thanks to the internet, our networks are now very global, and most of our friends live far away. But with this shift, we've lost a valuable resource along the way. We don't know as many neighbors as we once did. which has led to a decline in a lot of other things. Less local knowledge and wisdom being passed on, less compassion, more infighting, less solidarity, less ability to come together like Jane Jacobs and her neighbors. And during this time, I learned about William White and his documentary, The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. And if you haven't seen it yet, I think it's good to watch for anyone who has a role in developing places. It's free on Vimeo. And in the 1970s, he recorded New Yorkers in plazas like a scientist on safari to better understand why some public spaces work better than others. And with modesty and humor and love, he shows how we can design more compassionate places for people by observing what's really happening. There are a lot of urban theories during this time that looked sexy on paper but didn't really play out well in reality. Like when I was studying architecture, all of my teachers are really hot and bothered by Le Corbusier. And that's his utopia, the radiant city on the left. And it divided working and living and playing into these very distinct areas. And it became the inspiration for low-income housing in New York City and other cities across the U.S. And in the end, it was really disastrous in real life. It created these really drab, blank wastelands at the ground level that no one wanted to hang out in, and which eventually led to neglect and crime. And I think this is a good lesson that people experience places from the street, not from the sky, and those details at the street level make a huge difference. And his work really encouraged me to trust my own real-world experiences and follow my questions and take note that even in the most critically acclaimed public spaces, I still feel barriers to opening up to others. So during this time, I lived 4 blocks from this hub for street art on Spring Street, and it made a big difference in how I perceived public space, because it made me feel like public space wasn't this pristine, sterile place that I can't touch. It made me feel like it was this colorful, informal place where I could add to the mix too. And I did. I made a lot of street art experience with my friends, and I started to look more closely at the messages in public space, the informal messages. You see flyers everywhere. Flyers are spread throughout the interstitial spaces of the city, and things like lampposts have become like unofficial billboards for local communication. And I thought about the potential of the flyer, this latent message left out for all to see and to respond to if they liked. And I started documenting flyers across different neighborhoods and comparing them to online forums. And since the earliest days, the internet was considered a kind of public space. And Lee Felsenstein, one of the founders of the personal computer, he advocated using the internet to restore an information commons. And this has come true in many ways, that it made me wonder how our physical public spaces can continue to advance and become an information commons as well. The more that residents can come together and self-organize, the more we can share wisdom and make more places more ours. The more that we can help one another out and our hopes for our communities and for our lives. And if our public spaces are designed differently and we are given the opportunity, we have more to share with one another. So I began to experiment with interactive prompts in public space using really cheap tools. And they all came from questions I had, and they started out really practical, like this one. I just wanted to know how much my neighbors paid for their apartments. And I covered the storefront with these stamped Post-it notes, asking my neighbors how much they pay in rent. And by the end of the week, this window was transformed into this useful collection of housing information that was created by and relevant to my community. With Good Magazine, I created a double-sided doorknob hanger that you could tear out of the magazine and use as a tool for residents in close quarters to easily offer and borrow things from their neighbors without disturbing each other at a bad time. On Governor's Island in New York, I created a pedestrian timeline on the pavement so people could learn more about the history of the island while taking a leisurely stroll along it. And I created these notepads and posted them in subways across New York so you could tear off a sheet and have a map of all the semi-public restrooms in the area. And while these projects are about sharing local knowledge and resources, I started to wonder how we could shape new ones. Now I live in New Orleans, and I love it. I worked on a criminal justice project there in 2005, 2006, and totally fell in love with the city. I feel like it'll be home base for life. New Orleans is really good for my soul. So here's a shot of downtown. And just east of the French Quarter is the Marigny in Bywater, where I live, and it's full of all these colorful shotgun houses that are so damn cute, I want to like pet them. And this is my neighborhood sign. It's hand painted with the levee below and a million stars above. Here's a pocket park down the street from me. Here's a neighborhood parade where people proudly march with little shoebox-sized floats with a full-on marching band on either end. And here's a Trojan horse. You know, there's always something a little odd and kind of broken and always beautiful happening in the streets there, and I think that's why I love New Orleans so much. It's easy to keep dreaming when you're awake. And it's interesting to see how many hybrid businesses there are in my neighborhood, you know, businesses serving multiple needs. So this place, among many things, is a liquor store / laundromat. There's a pet supply store / art supply store. There's a Mardi Gras party bead store that doubled as a grocery after the main one closed after Katrina, and now it's become the main grocery with just a little bit of party supply on the mezzanine. And there are also vacant storefronts. And I think many of us walk by underutilized areas of our communities and have opinions of what we like to see in these places. You know, who knows a neighborhood better, a place better than the people who live and work there? You know, we know what will make our place more comfortable, more complete, more ours. What do we want? So I made these fill-in-the-blank stickers as a kind of crude tool and experiment, like a love child of street art and urban planning. To see what might happen if we could easily say what we want where we want it. And they're made of vinyl, so they can be easily removed without damaging property. And I put boxes of free stickers in businesses around the city and posted grids of blank stickers on vacant buildings all across New Orleans. And stuck a permanent marker next to the stickers using poster putty, so anyone walking by could easily fill one out. And I'd fill out one of the stickers. I'd write, you know, a grocery or something that I wanted to kind of seed the project and help passersby understand the intentions. And I designed it in the style of a "Hello, my name is" sticker, so hopefully more people walking by would quickly understand that they're invited to write on them. And it's a fun play on a building trying to figure out its identity. So it was all a big experiment. I didn't know what to expect. I would start out by posting a grid of 20, and then come back a few days later, take pictures of all the responses. If they're all filled out, I'd keep adding more stickers until many of these buildings had over 100 stickers on them. And I was really amazed to see the range of thoughtful responses, from a butcher shop to a community garden, from a place to buy flowers for my baby to heaven. You know, it's this fun, low-barrier tool to provide civic input on site. And the responses, they reflect the hopes and dreams and colorful imaginations across different neighborhoods. You know, I started using cheap tools like this because I was just trying to do what I could with what I had. And only later did I realize that it had all these other benefits. These analog tools, they're very accessible to everyone. It's anonymous, so you can open up in ways you might not have otherwise. It doesn't put you on the spot, so it allows shyer people like me to share just as much with their community. And the handwritten responses, they reveal a lot of personality that often gets lost with digital tools. So some people want better infrastructure like roads properly paved, sidewalks repaired, and bike racks installed. And some people want better food like an affordable farmer's market, a Chinese restaurant, a donut/flower shop, another good hybrid idea, or an entire building covered in bacon. You know, one of the things I really loved about this project was the range of responses, that people could have fun with it. It ranged from the functional to the poetic. Here's one of my favorites. I wish this was full of nymphomaniacs with PhDs. Sexy and smart. Now, some people dream of making it their own, like Keon and Kaylin's seafood place. My art gallery, my produce market and cafe. And some people dream of making it together. I really love this one. Someone wrote, I wish this was a bakery. And someone else wrote, if you can get the financing, I will do the baking. And that leads to the bigger question. What if residents had better tools to come together to shape the future of their communities? What if we want the same thing? What if we could prove there was a strong enough customer base for a new business or service to open? So my friends Dan and T. Parham and I, we took this idea a few steps further, and we created Neighborland, this tool to help people come together and collaborate on the places they care about. And thanks to a grant from Tulane University and the Rockefeller Foundation, we started out in New Orleans in 2011, and now it's available everywhere in the U.S. So you can say what you want in your community, you can see what everyone else wants, and you can click Me Too, so that one neighbor who wants the ability to recycle glass can become 10, 20, 30, and beyond. And there's a page for each idea where people can share meeting times, updates, local knowledge, petitions, and beyond. This project comes from our own experiences, and I've been to so many community meetings in my life where the voice of the community ends up being the handful of people who can make it, or the loudest people in the room. And I think in rural areas, it's even more challenging, the ability to meet in person. And that made us wonder, how can more people get involved over time? How can people get involved remotely? And how can the quiet people share just as much as the loud ones? So if you scroll down this page, you can see that people can share more information. Someone shared information on a new local startup that's recycling glass, and an organization shared information on their pilot program and the legal process to make recycling happen at the state level. So it's all local knowledge in one accessible place, and people can get involved on their own time. So people have turned ideas on Neighborland into a reality, like a pop-up night market that's become a regular thing, new bike lanes and signage, blight improvements, more food truck licenses, and petitions that have actually changed policies. And sometimes all it takes are a few residents to make progress, but other times it takes a lot more. And as we were watching and seeing how people were using the tool, we realized that it could turn into an archive of everyone's unfulfilled pipe dreams. So we started to tweak it. We wanted to focus we wanted people's responses to lead to change, real change as much as possible. So we developed tools for organizations to ask their communities questions in relation to real-world projects that they're working on. Like, what businesses do you want in the Saratoga? Where do you want bike lanes in New Orleans? How can San Francisco State serve the campus and our community better? Or how can we make UN Plaza a better place? These are all questions that have been asked by local organizations and businesses and institutions who are working towards these goals and running with people's ideas. And they can easily pair their online page with installations in public space to reach as many people who care about these places. And that includes interactive boards where people can, to gather feedback, flyers where people can tear off the URL and check out the page later, booths where people can vote on the most popular ideas, and signs where people can text in their idea to a number. And when people send in a text, their idea is automatically added to the online page, and they receive a direct link to it so they can stay updated on the project. So organizations have used the tool to create incremental changes, trying things out step by step. And because of the popularity of the idea of a night market, the Department of Public Works in San Francisco recently organized a test run with a night market every Friday and Saturday in October. And over 5,000 people came every time. And so now they're working on making a permanent night market in that space. Here's an example in a smaller city in Hutchinson, Kansas. They have a population of around, I think, about 50,000. And the city of Hutchinson and their Chamber of Commerce and local organizations, they teamed up to ask their community, how can we make Hutchinson and Reno County even better? And 12 popular ideas were voted on for a share of $15,000 in grants to make progress on those ideas. So if you scroll down the page, you can see everyone's ideas, including an indoor trampoline park, help revitalizing empty buildings, bike-friendly streets, safe routes for children to walk to school, and more support for the arts, all of which are moving forward now. And here's their event where they also included interactive signs for people to continue to share and discuss ideas. And, this project is inspired by our real-world experiences and our pain points. And I think places are more meaningful and cared for when residents have a voice in their development, in their future. And we need better tools to make that process more accessible, more inclusive, more fun and engaging. And there are a lot of passionate organizations out there who are doing their very best to improve their communities. But outreach and awareness is a really big challenge. So we hope that Neighborland helps make that process easier and more inclusive. And I think it is even more valuable in suburban and rural areas where it's more challenging for lots of people to meet in one place many times. So now you can participate on your own time. And if you have any questions, feel free to email dan@neighborland.com. So I continued to experiment on abandoned buildings, like this one in my neighborhood in New Orleans. But my questions became a lot more personal after I lost someone that I loved. Her name was Joan, and she was like a mother to me for 15 years. She was the one who really convinced me to follow my creative dreams when I was a teenager and really confused about school. And her death was really sudden and unexpected. And there were still so many things that she wanted to do. And I went through a long period of grief and depression. And with time, I felt gratitude for the time that we had together. And I found clarity in my life by thinking about death so much. When you think about death, a lot of things about life become absurd, and other things take precedent. And the philosopher Paul Tillich once said that the greatest sin of modernism is not evil, but the barren triviality that preoccupies us. The sort of humdrum submission to convention. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget what really matters to you. So I wanted a daily reminder, and I wanted to know what was important to the people around me. And after getting permission from the property owner, my neighborhood association, the neighbors around that house, I created this homemade stencil that said, "Before I die, I want to." And with help from old and new friends, I painted the side of this crumbling house with chalkboard paint and stenciled it with this prompt so that anyone walking by could pick up a piece of chalk and reflect on their lives and share their personal aspirations in public space. Again, it was all an experiment. I didn't know what to expect, but I was thinking, because it was cheap to make, it's no big deal if it doesn't work out. Well, by the next day, it was all filled out, and it kept growing. And this neglected space became a constructive one. And people's responses, they made me laugh and cry, and they consoled me during some of my toughest times. I got to understand my neighbors in new and enlightening ways. And I think most importantly for me, it reminded me that I'm not alone as I'm trying to make sense of my life. So neighbors introduced themselves in front of the wall while reading through the day's responses, and people who ordinarily had little to do with one another began taking care of it. The grandmother who lives across the street told me, people are around all the time now. The block is safer. So the wall in New Orleans was up for about 7 months in 2011, and it ended for the happiest of reasons. A new owner bought the property, and the house became a home again. But that wasn't the end of the project. I posted some photos online and it just spread. And my inbox blew up with messages from people around the world who wanted to make a wall with their community. So I created a website with free resources, and now 3 years later, thanks to passionate people who have spearheaded their own walls, there are now over 500 Before I Die walls in over 70 countries and stenciled in over 30 languages. And it's been one of the greatest experiences of my life to see this little experiment on this abandoned house in my neighborhood grow into this global project. So I'd like to share a few photos of some of these walls around the world and some things that people wrote on them. Before I die, I want to organize 1,000 exhibitions. Before I die, I want to become a real businesswoman. Before I die, I want to be accepted by my parents. Before I die, I want to be a stripper and a nun at the same time. Before I die, I want to master the trumpet. Before I die, I want to see where my grandma grew up. Before I die, I want to hold her one more time. Before I die, I want to stop being afraid. These public walls, they're like this honest mess. They're an honest mess of the longing and pain and joy and insecurity and gratitude and fear and wonder that you find in every community. Everyone is going through challenges in their life, and there's great comfort in knowing that you're not alone. But it's easy to forget this because there are a lot of barriers to opening up. And while those barriers remain, I think it's easy to forget the humanity and the people around us and become impersonal and even adversarial. During one of my gloomiest periods of existential confusion, I found a lot of comfort in this book called The Middle Passage by James Hollis, a Jungian analyst. And he said, "In the end, we are only tiny, frightened animals, doing our best to survive amid other tiny, frightened animals." And that may sound a little grim, but it always consoles me. I return to this sentence when I lose perspective, and it's something I remember when I consider our communities. Our personal anxieties extend into our public life, and many of the conflicts in our communities come from a lack of trust and understanding. It's this diagram again. We know fewer neighbors, which also means we have our guards up, we're not as trusting, we have a greater tendency to be impersonal and adversarial, we forget the humanity and the people around us. And over time I realized that this personal anonymous prompt in public space, it offers this gentle first step towards honesty and vulnerability in public, which can lead to trust and understanding. Trust and understanding, those are essential elements for a more compassionate community, a more compassionate city, which can not only help us make better places, but can help us become our best selves. Death is something that we're discouraged to talk about or even thinking about. When you bring it up, people often say, don't go there, or it's too sad, or you don't need to think about it until you're older. Well, none of us know how much time we have left. And it's easy to postpone our deepest needs. It's easy to take the people we love for granted. And I think it's far too easy to neglect our relationship with ourselves. In our age of increasing distractions, I think it's more important than ever to remember that life is brief and tender. And regularly contemplating death, as the Stoics and other philosophers have encouraged for centuries, is a really powerful tool to restore perspective and remember the things that make your life meaningful to you. And I'm happy to share that the Before I Die book is out now. It's a celebration of these walls and the stories behind them, and communal inspiration to help you maintain perspective and steer your mind about the things that matter most to you. The Before I Die project, it's turned into like a public art version of Linux, like an open source public art project. I encourage people to remix the project however they like. Ideas come from other ideas. And within a month of the first wall, this is the power of the internet, within a month of the first wall that I made in New Orleans, a guy in Lebanon emailed me and said they're inspired by that. So they created a remix called Lebanon Would Be Better If in Beirut. And the remixes kept growing from there. Happiness is in Nairobi. I run because in San Francisco. When I graduate in Washington, D.C., as I age in Nashville, energy enables in Brussels. I go downtown because in Tacoma. Today I'm grateful for in Vancouver, and my dream is in Rio de Janeiro. These are just a few of the ways that people have run with this idea in their own way. And they've connected different dots together, and shows the power of ideas that are open and free for everyone to use. I've been thinking about the passages of life. In different stages, our calling grows and evolves. As children, our calling is to play. Then we try to learn the ways of the world, to explore our energies and interests and talents. In the next phase of life, we try to become independent, follow our dreams, make a living, be a part of society. And then try to accept responsibility, nurture our family and relationships, balance work and the other parts of our lives. But our journey doesn't end there, and we continue to learn and grow throughout our entire lives as much as we allow ourselves. And I feel like a lot of time is devoted to seeking the right job or reputation or relationship or outward success. But that's not enough to be psychologically mature. And Carl Jung said it's easier to go to Mars or to the moon than it is to penetrate one's own being. And he coined the term individuation, which is a process in which someone becomes who they truly are. And he said the goal of life is individuation, the process of coming to know, giving expression to, and harmonizing the various components of the psyche. Each human being has a specific nature and calling, which is uniquely his or her own. And unless these are fulfilled through a union of conscious and unconscious, the person can become sick. In the second half of life, the question now becomes, who now, apart from your roles, are you? And do you have the bravery to deconstruct your identity, your anxieties, your neuroses, your confusions, and explore what you need to explore to be at peace with yourself? This is something that really interests me now. How can I do this for myself? And how can our public spaces become more contemplative and more nourishing to our mental health? Like this project, I'm going to share one last project. I spent a month living in Las Vegas, where I was artist in residence at the Cosmopolitan, and created a project in their gallery space. And, as they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And I thought, well, what if we could share in a way where we wouldn't be embarrassed? And when I traveled to Japan a few years ago, I was really inspired by the Shinto shrine prayer walls, where you can write a prayer on a wooden plaque and then hang it on this public wall for the spirits or gods to receive them. So inspired by that and Post-Secret and Catholicism, I invited people to anonymously share their confessions and see the confessions of the people around them in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip. So people could write and submit their confessions on wooden plaques in the privacy of confession booths. And then I hung the anonymous plaques up on the walls, so they gathered over time like a Shinto shrine prayer wall. And I projected select responses on large canvases and painted them. And by the end of the exhibit, over 1,500 confessions were displayed on the walls. From your name is tattooed on my ass, to I like porn more than my husband does, to I still love her, 2 girlfriends and 5 years later. From I'm scared I'll die alone to I eat too much cheese. And over the last year, I felt everything from joy to despair. And I saw it on these walls too. And I think when we feel fear or anxiety or confusion, we often do our very best to hide it from others. But what if we could make more safe places to share? There's great power in knowing you're not alone. You're not alone as you're trying to make sense of your life. And you're not the only one who feels like they're barely keeping it together. I've been thinking about why we came together in the first place. I've been thinking about the history of our cities, the fundamental elements of our shared spaces. The city historian Lewis Mumford, he once wrote that the origins of society, the reason we came together in the first place, was not just for physical survival, but for a more meaningful and valuable life. Some of the earliest gathering places were graves and sacred groves. We came together to grieve together and to worship together and to console one another and to be alone together. Our public spaces can play a profound role to help us make sense of the beauty and tragedy of life with the people around us. And through opportunities for collective introspection, I think we can gain great value in both self-realization and communal kinship. So today, I'm working on a number of projects, including this one. I'm really interested in the relationship between public space and mental health, and interested in how the tools we use to improve our mental health could become part of the city fabric for the public good. And one tool that has helped me a lot, and many others, is the I Ching. It's one of the oldest and most widely translated documents in the world, and it provides practical wisdom that can be applied to any situation for rigorous introspection. And so the Big I Ching reinterprets this resource into a permanent participatory mural to help people contemplate their lives and to promote emotional wellness as a significant component of comprehensive health. Emotional wellness is often taboo to discuss. How can we bring that out more? How can we make our cities, our public spaces, our communities more conducive and more nourishing to our mental health and to our emotional well-being? So I'm working with the Mural Arts program to create this, but I need more funding to create the interactive mechanism. I've just had engineers and fabricators work out all the details and the feasibility. So if you happen to have any recommendations on foundations or grants or organizations interested in a mural like this, civic art, community art, cities, and health, let me know. So I wanted to end with this. What you might consider your weaknesses can become your strengths. Being an introvert in an urban planning world where the loudmouths ruled made me question how the process could be different and more inclusive. And my experiences with loss and depression and personal confusion, they often became the fire for a lot of my urban experiments. So be sensitive to your struggles and the times that you feel out of place. If you take the time to understand them, you might find an opportunity to change the system. And the world becomes more rewarding when you let yourself look beyond what you're searching for. My projects are guided by my experiences, and I've learned, I've never had a 5-year plan, let alone a 1-year plan. I've had like a few months plan, and it's worked out, because I've learned, and I've stumbled on so many things that have changed the course of my life, and I think it's good to have goals. But it might be even greater to embrace serendipity, keep an open mind, and to allow random experiences to become meaningful to you and the other parts of your life, and to allow yourself to be open and receptive to the unexpected. Which takes us back to this guy. Remember Joseph Paxton, gardener and architect? I think his story is so compelling because it shows how creative we can all be if we approach our life and our work with the right attitude. Because it wasn't some unattainable flash of genius, simply that he was curious and he tried things out and he kept an open mind, and that let him do great things, and that's something that we can all do. So you can learn more about my projects in these places, and I hope one thing or another helps stir your mind about things you've been thinking about in your work and life. Thank you.